Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning, I'm Hilary Fordwich and welcome back to Government Contracting Weekly. Each week we strive to bring you, the government contracting community, useful information to help you win and retain government contracts. And certainly today's show is no exception as we welcome three special guests. Our first guest this morning is Seth Berenzweig of the law firm Berenzweig Leonard. Seth is an expert in the substantive and complex area regarding bid protests. After Seth, we welcome Alan Chvotkin from the Professional Services Council. Alan will be providing us with critical advice in the area of what contractors need to be doing in preparation for the inevitable era of austerity we're all entering. Finally, we're delighted to be joined by Al Malinchak, who heads the Learning Center for Homeland Security Solutions, Inc., as Al brings us a unique perspective regarding how creating your own learning center can lend to winning more contracts. We have a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. Welcome to our segment where we have with us a local expert. This morning we have with us Seth Berenzweig. Welcome, Seth.
Thanks for having me.
We're welcome. This morning we're going to talk about bid protests. And Seth, you have an extensive background and you actually become a leader in this area and a voice in terms of government contract protests. Could you share with our audience your background and how you've come to where you are today?
Sure, absolutely, and thanks very much for having me. I'm the managing partner of a business law firm in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, Berenzweig Leonard. We formed the firm a number of years ago to help companies, executives, and owners and human resource professionals address all of the current issues in the business world to help them keep their costs down, revenues up, win and protect government contract business, and flow through the myriad of government federal regulations. So we're in the trenches helping companies and executives and HR professionals really just address a lot of the current issues that are on their plate every day as they try to sift through all of the things on their plate to win and perform business in the federal sector.
And you also do a lot of on-air work. So how does what you do during the day lead to and expand when you go on air in the evening?
Well, we are helping companies understand in real time changes in the law, trends in the marketplace, and to understand how those things really affect the bottom line. There are so many developments that are happening in the legal world right now that are directly relevant to companies, owners, executives, and HR professionals. So as we'll be talking about today, it's very critical to understand what these changes are and what they mean and how to adjust to them, because if companies understand what these huge changes are, then they'll be able to adapt to the environment. If not, then they'll really be one step behind the competition. So part of what I do is to see what's happening and get on the air and explain it.
So it's not really just the actual law, it's how it's going to impact their companies and what each of our viewers should do with those regulations and with everything that you're addressing.
That's right, to help them be more efficient and to avoid the pitfalls as they get out there in the business world.
Right. Seth, your practice has been around for about a decade. In your opinion, are things better? Are they worse? And what are the changes you've seen during that time?
Well, they're definitely more challenging. Government contractors these days are feeling underappreciated and overregulated. The regulation has become more complex, so I think that over time it's become more challenging.
Give us some of those challenges. What particular challenges?
Well, we have more complex regulations, we have amendments to the FAR, there are more responsibilities involved, and the bid protest environment has become more intricate and moves very quickly. So that creates a lot of headwinds as companies try to create more business.
And are you seeing increased number of bids recently?
Yes, there's been more protests, there's been really an increase in that activity, and there's really been an increase in the level of more on the line because there's really limited dollars on the table and more companies are fighting more aggressively for that work.
So more bid protests are a result of increased competition, so it's not going to go away. It's actually going to increase in your...
That's exactly right. It won't go away anytime soon. It's been an increase, and I think that that trend will be increasing into the near term.
So Seth, we know that there's been an increase in bid protests, but you also mentioned to me that there's, over the last few weeks even increased procurement oversight, even increased legislation, new rules, new regulations. What are they?
Well, there's been huge developments over the last couple of weeks that are really affecting companies right now. So, for example, there was a critical decision that was issued by the DC Federal Court in a case that occurred just very recently that ruled that certain 8A set-aside programs for government contractors, particularly small government contractors, may be unconstitutional. This was a huge development. It was kind of like the proverbial tree in the forest that fell, and you wonder whether anybody really heard it. But it's
this
really
could
one of
impact
the most
small businesses dramatically.
Huge. It's a huge development because the court ruled that if you are going in and getting an 8A set aside, then if the agency, if the contracting officer doesn't demonstrate in the record a history of discrimination in your industry to justify that set aside award, it's unconstitutional. The companies are not aware of this development. They're just submitting proposals just like it's a normal day in the office. But the problem is that if you don't set that kind of a parameter, if you don't provide that in your proposal, at least to allow the contracting officer to understand that history, then you could lose the award. You can win the battle and you can lose the war.
So you have to actually look at the entire track record that you've had in terms of some kind of discrimination against your firm to get that set aside.
In the industry. So you have to be able to help the contracting officer in those instances demonstrate a history of discrimination in that industry so that you can secure that award. If you don't, then there'll be another company out there that will pounce on it. They'll trigger a bid protest. And now there's a new constitutional issue out there that people aren't even aware of, and it's hitting us right now.
So actually now companies need to think about and actually not necessarily create, but then people are going to be thinking more about discrimination than less, ironically.
That's right. And really this process will need to start earlier when people are talking about proposals, when they're talking about getting everything ready and when they're red teaming their proposals. They need to think about these issues now rather than attacking it when they get hit later in a protest.
Justifying it because
That's
it's too
exactly
late.
Right. Exactly. They need to lay the groundwork. They need to let themselves and the customer be successful to get the award and to protect the award.
What is your opinion about how this is going to affect the industry? I mean, small businesses are going to be impacted because that's also more resources they need to do all that documentation.
It's a huge impact on small business, and especially because I don't believe that most companies are even aware that this decision happened a couple of weeks ago. It's going to impact small businesses because they need to understand earlier about demonstrating about the discrimination in that industry to justify the award. And if they don't know what to plan for, the bid protest environment is so fast and deadlines happen so quickly that they can win the battle and lose the war.
And lose that award eventually.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Seth, let's address the protest avalanche. There are continually increases in terms of bid process filed with the GAO. It's not going away, and people say it's going to be an avalanche. So we've got the fiscal cliff, and now we have the avalanche. Can you address what contractors should do in light of that?
I think that companies need to be aware of the fact that the trend is there. There's more fighting for fewer dollars, and there needs to be an increased focus on having a sharper pencil in the earlier stage of the process and understanding what's happening at GAO that directly affects what you're doing. So, for example, there was a huge decision from GAO that happened just a couple of weeks ago that stated that depending upon what happens in the solicitation, the word may really should be sometimes read as shall. And therefore, when you're being told that you can do something, what really might happen is that it could really mean that it means shall, that you shall do something when you set forth certain things in the proposal that you're sending to the government. But a lot of companies are just using short programs that lay out the may and the shall, and then they just use that as a benchmark and they throw it in on the table when they don't realize that there are real developments happening in real time at GAO that are really going to affect their business. So they need to be aware of that.
Whether you're an incumbent or not.
Absolutely, whether you're an incumbent or not. And they also need to understand that if they win the work, that if there's a protest, that they need to intervene and they need to get active and really take off the gloves and fight for that award. So procedurally and substantively, there are huge developments with GAO. If companies are aware of that, they'll be much better positioned to win and retain the work that they get.
So in light of increased bid protests, really you've got to have expertise in the bid protest arena, in-house and external resources such as your firm and other companies that provide all the consulting around bid protests.
That's right, and to do it early, because if you don't trigger a protest, for example, within 5 calendar days days of the debriefing, then you're not going to get the automatic stay to freeze the award anyway. So you have to do the right thing, and you have to do it more quickly.
Seth, you're working with contractors large and small, 8As, primes, subs, across the board. You've seen the companies that do it wrong, you've seen the companies that do it right. What are the best practices you're seeing? What are they actually doing, and what are they preparing for, and how are they structuring their companies?
I think that what companies are doing that I like is that they're keeping the lines of communication open, and they're keeping their documents tight.
Lines of communication open with the government?
With the government, with the customer, making sure that you have line of communication open with the contracting officer and the COTAR, making sure that you have communication open with your subs, make sure that your documents are tight, make sure that you are protected. If you're the sub and you're the small business, make sure that you have some control. And it's really all about gaining control. Everybody talks about the unpredictability in the federal sector, but a lot of this is controllable. Your teaming agreements, your subcontracts, your relationships. If you have a mod and the contracting officer tells you to do something, get the mod in writing, get the control back, and then when you bring that in, you're going to be able to increase the level of predictability and revenues as you continue to perform the work for the customer.
So you're saying really be aware of all the regulations that are out there, and then adjust your company and plan and prepare around what we do know is definite.
Absolutely, and make sure that those documents are tight and the relationships have a good communication flow.
Okay, thank you. You're also working with lots of contractors, and I know that you have strong opinions about what contractors are contributing to the government, to our national security, to healthcare IT, across the board contractors. Mm-hmm. If you'd like to share with our audience some of the sentiments that you see and what you're seeing in the environment.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is why I think this program is great, because it really addresses one of the most critical areas of our industry and our marketplace today, here in Washington and nationally. Government contractors are underappreciated, overregulated, and don't have a lot of flexibility for profit margin, and they're really delivering critical mission for the federal government. We represent government contractors that keep satellites alive so that the State Department can communicate with each other during a crisis. We represent one of the largest court security companies in the United States, where when a gunman walked into a courthouse and tried to shoot a judge, that security guard officer stepped in front of the bullet and took that bullet, and he paid with his life. They rushed him to the hospital and he died. These companies are developing and delivering critical missions for the federal customer, and they're doing a great job. What they need to do is to continue to focus on critical legal developments, business trends, and to make sure that they can continue to be successful in a competitive environment.
So they can serve our nation and serve us, the taxpayers, and every member of our audience too.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining us this morning, Seth. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. You bet.
Well, as you could see, Seth's advice is exceptionally timely, as there are so many time-sensitive statutory and legal triggers that protesters must know about the bid protest mechanism. Likewise, Alan Chvotkin is going to share with us some of the advice that the Professional Services Council has been providing to their many members. So let's take a look. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us, Alan Chvotkin, here from the Professional Services Council.
My pleasure, Hillary. Good morning.
Morning. And Alan has been with the Professional Services Council for many years. Could you give our audience a little bit of an overview as to your role and what PSC does for your members?
Well, Professional Services Council is a national trade association. We represent over 350 companies, all of whom sell professional and technical services to the federal government. So we're an advocate for the industry at the federal level. We engage often with the Congress, with the regulatory agencies, and with the buying agencies about what they're buying and how they're buying, with a focus on services.
Good. And in the moment for services, like it is for product companies, for all government contractors, we're in an era of austerity. While people say there's a 50% chance of sequestration going through, 100% chance of budget cuts. So what are you advocating that your members do and don't do right now?
Well, with respect to the austerity, there's no question it's coming. We've seen the decline in federal spending, even on services, over the last couple of years. So we're encouraging our companies to take aggressive action to control cost, make sure they understand the nature of the work that they already have, the flexibility that those current contracts provide, and look at the pipeline of future business and try to make some assessment about the likelihood that those will continue in an austere environment, and if so, how the government will buy those goods and services, again with a focus on services.
A little bit different now moving forward.
Right.
Yes. Alan, there's been a recent memo from Ash Carter over at he's a Deputy Secretary of Defense, and he said that really spending should continue as normal. What are you advising your members? Are you saying that this is something that they should continue to do through the beginning of 2013?
Well, first of all, we welcome the Ash Carter memo. It was directed primarily at Department of Defense officials, not contractors, and it is very consistent with the position the administration has taken, which is don't plan for sequestration. We don't want sequestration to happen, and he does not want the department to take any action that would preclude the Congress and the President from reaching agreement to change the sequestration process. While it's okay for the department to take that approach, we don't believe that companies can sit back and wait for a solution that might come at the 11th hour or not come at all. And so we've been strongly encouraging our companies to actively engage with the agencies. If it's business as usual, we should expect business as usual behaviors from the Department of Defense, at least from other federal agencies as well. We're just not seeing that right now.
So there haven't been indicators that you would imagine if that was true?
That's correct. There haven't been those indicators. We've seen pockets of where Defense Department agencies are slowing down their spending, delaying award decisions. They too are as confused about the likely impact of sequestration, where it will hit and how much it will hit, as we are in the contractor community.
And what do you think about the WARN Act? Do you think the companies should be issuing those warnings in terms of layoffs?
Well, the WARN Act is a very specialized statute. It's a labor statute. It's not a procurement law. And so it brings in a whole new genre of advisors to the companies. Companies need to carefully assess where their programs, contracts that they have, and what a reduction that might occur in those contracts could mean to their workforce. WARN Act requires some very specific actions by companies. To the best of our knowledge, no Professional Services Council member company is issuing WARN Act notices in advance of some decisions by the Department of Defense and other federal agencies on how they'll affect individual contracts. I think that's the right approach. We don't provide legal advice to our companies, but that kind of approach is very consistent with what we believe the law provides and how the sequestration process might work.
And that's what we're seeing from our audience as well. They don't see that it's actually they have to do it. Alan, how likely is it that there's going to be some kind of benefit to government contractors? You know, there's a doom and gloom, there's a negative environment, but tell us something positive that a government contractor can look to and say, oh, that's something great we can get out of this, Alan.
Well, there are some positives. First of all, it takes some action on the company's part. Sequestration planning should force companies to do a tough introspection about their business systems, how they're set up, where they can find economies of scale. We're going to see reductions, whether they come through an automatic reduction, such as sequestration, or some other budget reduction. So that introspection about methods and processes within the company is very valuable.
So driving efficiencies internally.
Absolutely. Can only help. Secondly, having a better understanding of the contracts that they have, the nature of them, fixed price versus cost type, the life cycle of those costs, and the customer feedback about how important those contracts are to the agency, to the customer. Very valuable information. That latter, harder to get, requires the customer to participate, to engage with the contractor. But even asking those questions, evaluating the company's past performance, both in the official database as well as in the informal database. Very valuable information, because as we see reductions, we see the competition for future work increasing.
So as an incumbent, you can't be complacent.
No.
Ever.
Ever.
Especially now.
Ever. We're seeing more and more incumbents replaced by successor contractors. Either they get comfortable or they think they know what the agency, complacent. Very difficult behavior to be in. And so if the threat of sequestration makes companies do a better job of looking internally, evaluating their methods, evaluating their current contracts and future business, that's an upside.
Alan, this show, we always focus on the keys to winning. What does it really take for a government contractor? A prime, a sub? Any of your members that are service companies at the Professional Services Council, what do you see are the keys to winning the most successful members of your council?
Well, that varies because of the breadth of the association members, but there are a couple of keys, I think, in the sequestration that'll be key to success and to winning future business. First of all, to clearly understand the nature of the work you have, the customers that you're working with. Secondly, to be able to broadly communicate, not only with your employees, but with your subcontractors and with your agencies as well, about the actions you're taking. You want to do everything you can to position yourself with those customers as a value-added member of their team, helping them meet the missions, and to treat your employees with the success and respect, because for most of our professional services firms, it is the employees who are doing the work, not some machine. Finally, to look carefully at the future business. How the government is buying is changing rapidly. We see more awards being made on lowest price, technically acceptable. We're seeing greater competition for every award at the prime contract level, at the task order level on IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. And so sharpening that competitive edge by working through their processes, getting their proposal efforts sharpened up, their corporate qualifications very clear. All of those factors, I think, will help contribute to success. You have to play to win, and that means you've got to engage aggressively with the agencies on new business.
Right. So thank you, Alan, because Alan shared with us, you heard there, some advice about IDIQs, some advice about lowest price, technically acceptable. I hope that our viewers today heeded all of your advice, and thank you, Alan, for joining us, and thank you to the Professional Services Council for making it available.
Thank you, Hillary, for the opportunity.
So Alan Chvotkin urged government contractors to take a fresh look at everything they're planning and structuring in order to find ways to improve performance. On a related note, Malinchak has a unique track record of creating profit centers for organizations and businesses via embracing learning. So let's hear Malinchak. Al, good morning.
Morning, Hillary. How are you?
Great. Al now heads the Homeland Security Solutions, Inc. Learning Center. He formerly, though, was with the FBI, and he headed Mantech University as a chief learning officer. I think it's very unique for our audience to hear your background from the FBI and what that brought to the marketplace.
Well, I was very fortunate to be a public servant in the FBI. I was an FBI special agent, both in operations, administration, and executive capabilities. And I took learning and education within the FBI, particularly at the FBI Academy, and learned how to make it a very cost-efficient, efficient, with learning outcomes that are greatly enhanced on a capability matrix.
And that's really important. And I think one of the things we need to talk about a bit more is I think our audience would love to hear, gosh, learning looks like often to a corporation just a cost, but you're saying it can be a benefit and financial benefit. So we'll get into some of that. Now I think that our audience might have their interest piqued, Al, because while the audience might be thinking, and an executive in their minds, I'd love to have my people learn more. I know that I want them to grow. I know that increased expertise is beneficial for an offering to my customer. However, they're probably thinking it's a cost center. In this current era of budget cuts, anything that costs something to a company isn't necessarily appealing. You're unique, Al, because you have created a previous experience, I know at Mantech and now at Homeland Security Solutions, a profit center for your learning center. Tell the audience about that.
Taking the opportunity to turn training, education, and learning into a revenue, top-line revenue growth, bottom-line savings that has an impact on net operating profit is relatively easy. The things that you do are relatively the same whether you're offering training internally or offering it to your client externally.
Like give us some of the quality characteristics of that.
Companies, yes, there is a cost to investing in training, and that's always an issue, particularly in these economic times. However, the investment in training, in particular investment in professional certifications and the development of your employees, will be a tangible impact as a discriminator as companies are responding to RFPs from the military or for the government.
and then the military and government looks at it and says they've invested in their people, they have an improved quality of employee and professional, and helps you win, which is what, of course, what our show is all about.
Yes, that discriminator of having that enhanced capability through the individuals and having them assigned to those particular contracts gives you a leg up on winning a lot of different contracts.
Great. Al, so we know that an organization should establish a learning center. You've made it profitable. Give our audience some tips as to how you actually go about that and how they could go about that.
Well, for example, if your organization has several project management professionals that are certified by the Project Management Institute, they require training every year. As a matter of fact, for a PMP, a project management professional, 60 hours over a 3-year period. That's very costly for organization. So internally, if you can use the capabilities you develop for your clients and build courses that have the same capability of providing professional development units for your internal employees, you save money. So there's a bottom line savings. That product that you've invented internally, that course, you can now sell externally to other organizations that are looking to enhance their project management professionals.
So you create those and then it's an offering in terms of an actual curriculum externally?
Yes.
Yes, great.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Al, thank you for joining us this morning. I'd like to give an exit question to you in terms of our audience is watching and they may not have a chief learning officer like you, and it may be a specific executive in charge of a company thinking, now, what will be the things I should institute this week, this month, to the rest of the year? What should I focus on in terms of winning, bearing learning in mind? What would you say those 3 things should be?
I think organizations should invest in their people, develop them as individuals to benefit the company as well. Invest in their professional certifications. As an example, if you have information technology specialists and they don't have a professional certification in A+, Security+, Network+, give them that capability. And lastly, invest in our vets again. Professionalize your workforce with the discipline and the capability and the experience that they bring, which will be very, very beneficial to your organization.
And to our country too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope our audience takes that away and maybe can implement some of those by the end of the year. There's absolutely no debate about the need for all of us in the government contracting industry to elevate our game to a whole new level. The current state of our national and global economy has created a fiercely competitive marketplace unlike any previously experienced. Our goal here at Government Contracting Weekly is to help equip you in dealing with this challenging marketplace. And certainly, we believe all of our experts today have done so. Seth Berenzweig of Berenzweig Leonard, Alan Chvotkin of the Professional Services Council, and Al Malinchak of Homeland Security Solutions, Inc., we believe have accomplished that this morning. We hope that you found these guests beneficial, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you for joining us.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.